Aaron Matei is with us. Now, you know him. He's our special guest for a limited time. He's a contributor to The Nation and The Gray Zone. He's the winner of the I.F. Stone Izzy Award for Independent Journalism for his meticulous debunking of the Russiagate narrative. You can read his work at his new Substack, matei.substack.com. Please welcome all the way from Syria, award-winning journalist Aaron Matei. Hi, Aaron. How are you?
Hi, Jimmy. How are you? I'm good.
I said your name both ways just to make sure I had it right. All right. I got to get into this. You were unbelievably slandered or libeled. I don't know what it is, but it was by the Young Turks, and I'm just going to, you tweeted this out. You said, in this insane and libelous clip, Cenk, Uygur, and Anna Kasparian say that I am paid by the Russians, seem to be working for dictators and deny chemical attacks on children. I don't care about their disdain for me, but I do care about being smeared. Now, I just want to let everybody know that Aaron is done some of the premier work on this debunking the pro-war narrative, CIA narrative, the intelligence community, the military-industrial complex narrative, the State Department's narrative on Syria, which is that we have to go get involved in a war in Syria because Assad is using chemical weapons on his own people. Well, we've debunked that. In fact, the OPCW had two different whistleblowers, and you've covered that. You've testified in front of the UN on that. Aaron Matei is the premier debunker of this pro-war narrative. And now he's actually on the ground in Syria, reporting live from Syria. So I just want to show you what the Young Turks had to say about him. Now, keep in mind, they did similar things to Julian Assange, but here they are doing it to this guy.
And I don't know what to say.
They said Aaron Matei yelled at me. And so
Aaron Matei lied. Aaron Matei. Everyone cares what Aaron Matei has to say, right?
Okay.
The guy who denies that Syrian children were killed with chemical attacks. Yeah.
And
fuck
gets
Aaron
paid by
Matei.
the...
Yeah, fuck you.
Anyway,
let's move on.
Russians.
Let's end the freaking pod. I can't.
Okay, see, that's what happens.
I can't stand that guy, and I can't stand the very intentional disinformation they put out there in regard to disgusting dictators around the world. The very people they seem to be working for, to be quite honest with you. Let's move on.
All right, we're done.
Disgusting. Absolutely disgusting.
But, if Aaron Matei feels really warm in his Russian blanket, he's like, oh, but the Russian government favors me. He should be super proud of that. Way to go, Aaron. You did it. Okay.
Yeah.
And gets
fuck
paid
Aaron
by
Matei.
the...
Yeah, fuck you.
Anyway,
let's move on.
Russians.
Let's end the freaking pod.
Okay. I put a little loop on that at the end, but that was fantastic. That's supposed to be a newscast, folks. That is supposed to be a newscast. It sounds like the ending of a cult meeting. That's what that sounds like more. He wasn't sure if he was going to go... Jake wasn't sure if he was going to go for the paid by the Russian smear or not, but he went for it. He went all on. Fuck you, Aaron. All I have to just say to you, Aaron Matei, is fuck you. Leave Mueller alone. Leave Mueller alone. And people say that they're the same as MSNBC. Well, obviously they're not. You can't swear on MSNBC. So that's where their big difference is. So let me bring in Aaron. I just want to show this is the kind of coverage that Aaron's been debunking, and we've been debunking here. This is how CNN covered Syria when they claimed there was a gas attack. This is what they did. They sent this woman, who, by the way, is the granddaughter of the former deposed president of Syria, and there's the investigation she did.
And there's definitely something that stings.
So that's the and I just want to so you went on and said they're free to have their own beliefs, but they're not allowed to smear you. You've never been paid by the Russians, and you've never denied chemical attacks on children. That's McCarthyite, trash, and libelous. And here you are saying chemical attacks. I've covered one of the biggest pro-war deceptions since Iraq, the stage incident in Duma in the OPCW cover-up scandal that exposed it. Doing Trump's bidding, journalists like Cenk, Uygur, and Anna Kasparian have completely ignored it. They won't cover this. So, Aaron, you've blown the whistle off this, and they refuse to cover this at the Young Turks. Of course, the mainstream media isn't giving you any press, but you think alternative news would. Of course, they're not doing that. In fact, they're pushing the State Department, military-industrial complex, establishment bullshit, Syria war bullshit, and you're here debunking it. I have a few more things, and then I want to bring you in. You say, when Cenk Uygur opens by saying, Ermite yelled at me, I think he's referring to this tweet from below. We can judge for yourself this concept. So here it is. So Cenk Uygur made one of the dumbest tweets of all time. He said, Israelis and Palestinians kill each other over which sky god they pretend to speak to, and it's politically incorrect to point out there is no human god, let alone one that favors Jews or Muslims, all this violence over the equivalent of which character they like better in the MCU. And then you came back by saying, my God tells me this is the worst tweet of all time. And so you ratioed him like crazy on that tweet. You got by thousands. And so that obviously stuck in his craw because he said all that crazy shit about you. And so you've said, I've only state you've ever worked for is Qatar as an Al Jazeera producer, and I've never worked or been paid by Russia or any Russians or any other state. By the way, when it comes to being paid shilling for disgusting people who kill children, Anna Kasparian doesn't need to look far. So she's your disgusting killing children, but here she is talking to a bona fide war criminal who admitted to killing 500,000 children, and she's here.
We have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And you know, is the price worth it?
I think this is a very hard choice, but we think the price is worth it.
And instead, it was just a softball interview for which Kasparian, I mean, it appeared to have been a paid gig for a NATO conference.
Welcome to your MSC. I am delighted to be here and to have a conversation with the former U.S. Secretary of State under Bill Clinton, Madeleine Albright. And Madeleine Albright was actually the first female Secretary of State in the U.S. And it is a pleasure to have you here. It's an honor to have a conversation with you.
Well, I'm delighted to be interviewed by you. Thank you very much.
So, Katie Halper said, I hope they apologize and clarify that they were indeed making stuff up about you out of their asses while claiming to be the reasonable adults in the room who distinguish themselves from unhinged, ego-driven conspiracy theorists. So that was Anna Kasparian completely doing the exact opposite. She has all the disdain in the world for you, but not for an actual war criminal who admits to killing 500,000 people. She incorrectly says that you deny some children being killed. That's not true. She responded to Katie Halper by saying he's reporting glowingly about Assad in Syria right now. That, of course, is not true whatsoever. Again, just making glowingly. Of course, she didn't link to a video. Of course, she didn't link to anything. She didn't clip anything or show you some of the glowing, nothing. Just made it up, just like they made up the Russian thing, just like they made up he's denying some, just like everything they made up. She said he's admitted himself to both receiving financial awards from pro-Assad groups and working with Russian-backed media to leak personal info on anti-Assad activists. I might curse a lot, but I also read a lot. Try it. Now, I just want to tell people when she says that you've received money from a pro-Assad group, I've received money from that group, too. They're not a pro-Assad group. They're anti-interventionist group. They're a peace organization here in California, and nobody will tell the truth about the bullshit narrative about the Syria war. So that's why they did that. She pretends that's pro-Assad. That'd be the equivalent of what, during the run-up to the Iraq war, if we did work that showed that the WMD thing was a lie, and then someone gave us a award for that, they would call that pro-Saddam Hussein money. That's the equivalent of what they're doing. So Aramate tweets out, unlike your glowing NATO-furnished interview with Madeleine Albright, I'm not reporting glowingly about Assad and never have. What's your evidence? The same with the rest of your bullshit claims. What you've read a lot are tweets by pro-war hacks lying about me. And her response to this was really detailed. She said, LOL. That was her response. So again, nothing, no link to your reporting that she's claiming you're doing, nothing, no disputing of anything you've ever factually said, just complete garbage smears by someone from the National Enquirer. That's the level. That's not even Fox News level. That's not even Alex Jones level. That's National Enquirer level, and that's what TYT is now. Aaron, I don't agree with Anna's characterization of your work, but it does seem somewhat hypocritical of you to be outraged by a lack of charitability after you explicitly accused her of promoting NATO. Well, it's because she did promote NATO, and I think we just showed that. Yes, where have I gotten this from? Here it is. You want to see where she got it from? Here.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Anna Kasparian, and we're about to have a conversation with Ian Bremmer. He's the founder of Eurasia Group, and we're going to discuss U.S.-China relations along with the role of NATO in attempting to keep peace internationally. I hope you enjoy.
Oh, you're at the Munich Security Conference, your MSC 2020. Now, I got invited to one of those things in Oslo, and I got kicked out on the first day because I called them all war criminals, which is what they are. Rania Kalik said, can you please explain why Madeleine Albright is good enough for you to give a glowing interview to, despite her saying the death of 500,000 children in Iraq in the 90s from sanctions was worth it? But Aaron Mate is evil and deserving of your smears? You are smearing an award-winning journalist who exposed the WMD scandal. You should be ashamed of yourself. You'll do a glowing interview of a child-killing sanctions cheerleader, Madeleine Albright, but then smear an anti-war journalist? That's very revealing behavior. Wow. So there's more I'm going to get to, but I want to bring in Aaron and just to get your reaction to this about what when you saw this, what you thought, and just your reaction.
There's so many lies in that little, also then in the where to start. I mean, look, starting with Cenk declaring that I'm paid by the Russians. It's just a lie. He's just fucking lying. And I don't know, like, do they consider themselves journalists? I actually don't know. Do they think of themselves as journalists?
Yes.
I wouldn't presume that, because my understanding of their show is they just sit there and talk for like 4 hours and nobody watches. That's my understanding of what TYT is now. But it's like, if they consider themselves journalists, where does it enter their head that they can just say stuff like that? And Ben claims that I'm paid by Russia. It's crazy. And then going on and on and on to everything else they say. Like, and look, it's a part of this thing. It's really come very clear in Russiagate, where a lot of people who consider themselves progressive either got duped or just completely decided to subordinate themselves consciously for career reasons that promoted Russophobia, that promoted the CIA and the FBI. And that was a concerted attack on progressivism, on progressivism trying to taint a real left-wing agenda. That's what Russiagate was. It wasn't just this attempt to constrain Trump's presidency or bring him down. It was also a defense of the neoliberals and the hawks who lost to Trump in 2016 and who then weaponized this whole Russiagate thing to taint any kind of like anti-war sentiment and dissent from neoliberal orthodoxy. And so these people calling themselves progressives have shown themselves, as we've talked about many times, to be complete dupes for that, to be complete useful idiots, parroting Russiagate constantly, never admitting fault. And so now, you know, when I make a joke about Cenk's dumb tweet about Israel and Palestine, I was making a joke. They take that as me yelling at Cenk. And go off, this is there's almost too much insanity there for me to respond to. It's almost like I'm dealing with deranged people. So I feel kind of maybe even it's like immoral to try to like engage on what they say because they're so unhinged. But everything they say is a lie. Everything Anna said in her tweet is a lie. And that's why when I challenge her, she, of course, can't produce any evidence for it. Because it's all of it is based on things people have said about me on Twitter. If you look at, for example, my coverage of Russiagate, and also the OPCW cover-up scandal. I've written so many articles, which I worked very hard on. You'd think, with all the people who don't like me and who say that I'm wrong, I'm on the wrong side. You'd think there'd be maybe one article rebutting me in print where you can check sources and look at arguments. There's nothing. It's all just smears on Twitter. So when Anna says I read a lot, I should have asked her to cite one article that substantiates any of her claims. Able to. It's just bullshit people say about me on Twitter. And that's the level these people who call themselves journalists, I guess, are at. It's such a fucking parody. Our country is such a parody. These people actually are allowed to exist in a progressive media space and have, some kind, I don't know, like I guess they must have some audience or something because they're on TV. But it's comical. It's really comical.
Well, what's interesting when you say that Cenk just flat out lied, I mean, honestly, I can't overstate how flummoxed and just jaw-dropping what they did is. Like, all his McCarthy smears from the last 5 years, everything Rachel Maddow has said, all the stuff they said about Julian Assange, this is just, it goes beyond that. I mean, the fact that they still have a show after this is just going to be, but here's what I want to point out. I know Cenk knows he's lying about you, and I know Anna knows they're lying because they know that the Syria narrative is a bullshit narrative. How do I know this? Because Cenk, well, here's the Syria girl says, it's true that both you and Cenk Uygur also shed doubt on the State Department's version of the chemical attacks in Syria, both in 2013 and in 2018. So what's your real issue with Aaron Matei? So here it is. Here's in Cenk from 2018. He says, it's incredible how readily the cable news channels have politicians on pushing the war in Syria with almost no questions asked about how disastrous it might be or the so-called evidence. They pretend to learn lessons from Iraq, but have actually learned nothing. So them saying that you took, so let's go to the next one. Interesting agreement beginning to form between the left and the right online about skepticism on the Syria story. Meanwhile, the establishment press, as usual, believes the Pentagon without question or evidence. The push for escalation on TV is overwhelming. So he was skeptical, and rightly so, but now Anna Kasparian pretends like that's not a true skepticism and that you're somehow a nefarious actor who is enjoying and ignoring the slaughter of children because you have the right skepticism, and in fact you've proven that the narrative about the gas attacks in Syria is false. You've proven it. Go ahead.
Well, that's the thing. By her standards, as you say, what Cenk does there is disgusting.
Yes.
Is defending in her demented mind the murder of children, and possibly might be evidence that he's working directly for dictators. Right. I think in that same tweet there also was an example of him sharing an article where they call one of the alleged gas attacks an Israeli false flag.
That's right.
I've never gone that far. So look, now that this is out there, Anna, if you see this, I'm looking forward to you sitting next to Cenk on your next show, and denouncing Cenk for being disgusting and maybe speculating these being paid by dictators. By your deranged standards, that is what he does. I'd love to see that. And of course we won't, because Anna's a deranged hypocrite with no real moral consistency, with no evidence to back anything up she says. And what's funny is the difference between, Cenk putting out some tweets and what I do, as you said, is that I've done actual journalism. And that's the problem here. It's like there's, in this like online media culture where people like this get to consider themselves journalists, there's such a degradation of the journalism profession where, like it's writing an article takes a very long time. Like doing a video, I have to say, because I do both, doing a video is a lot easier. You talk, you make some edits. If you get something wrong, you re-record it. Writing is a long process, and especially if, you're doing research and you're being fact-checked. And so it's like, but there's like the fact that I've done all this reporting on this incredibly important story, the OPCW cover-up, it doesn't enter these people's brains. It doesn't even occur to them because they're not journalists. They think that sitting in front of a camera and spouting their dumb opinions counts as journalism. And I have to wonder, what happened to Cenk? Because that who I actually donated. I realized that I gave money to his congressional campaign in 2019. I actually gave money to his congressional campaign because, even though I disagree with him on Russiagate, I saw sometimes some flashes of like a conscience and some kind of reason. And I think him voicing skepticism of these chemical allegations is a good example of that. So what happened to that guy? How did he go from that to now inventing claims that I'm paid by Russia?
So because they just got
sad. I feel sorry for him.
They just got so used to doing that over the last 5 years. I couldn't stand it. That they just would McCarthy smear and red bait every one of their political adversaries, and they're doing it now to you. Anybody, it's just that's their flex. He's a Russian. I mean, that looks so ridiculous. It's like I almost feel sorry for how pathetic and just bonkers nuts. And no one is watching their show anymore. They used to have 30,000 live viewers. They now have maybe 3,000. It's sad what has happened to them. Those are two people who know that their company is spitting in a downward spiral, and they're lashing out. And so they're lashing out at you. They've lashed out at me. They lashed out at Julian Assange. People doing real journalism. So I want to show people here.
Telling the truth here. But lately, I have to confess that WikiLeaks has not had an astounding record.
Now, he was reporting on Julian Assange, and they were pretending that a bullshit story written by Luke Harding, another person that Aaron Maté has debunked, in The Guardian, wrote a story that Paul Manafort had visited Julian Assange 3 times at the embassy in London, except there's no video of it. There's no pictures of it. There's nothing of it. It was a made-up story. We reported it that way. The Young Turks reported it as it was fact. And by the way, that video is still up. You can go to the Young Turks channel and put in Julian Assange, Paul Manafort, and that video is still there. And even after it was completely debunked, they still haven't retracted it or corrected the story. And here's the more garbage they said.
The way that Assange seems to be backing Donald Trump over and over and over again, it makes me very seriously question Assange's efforts to actually be a journalist and not to be a partisan. And I get it. I get why he hates the Democrats. They're trying to put him in prison. Okay,
right. But
at the same time,
so are Republicans. Let's be clear about that.
And now the Republicans are too, and they have been in the past. But it seems like Assange has picked a side. And look, it makes me question his reporting. And so that's the situation we're in now. So now, is he just leaking things that he gets, and no matter what, in which case I would respect that? Or is he selectively leaking based on his political motives? Now that suspicion is out there and it's real and it's possible, well, now I'm concerned that it can't be trusted.
That's Cenk Uygur saying that another reporter has picked a side. And that's why you can't trust him. And by the way, that guy who picked a side has been the most decorated publisher of news in our lifetime and has exposed war crimes left and right. What the fuck have you... And by the way, he's right now being prosecuted by he was trying to be killed by the guy you claim he's siding with. Even Anna pointed out how crazy that was. Wait a minute. Donald Trump's trying to kill him right now, too. Yeah, but he's still siding with him. You fucking maniac. It doesn't make any... So, and here he is now doing that to you. And you tell me, he's saying that you're taking money from the Russians. He's taking $20 million from Clinton donors. And then they did a $2 million fundraising campaign to hire journalists, and they fucking fired them all. And if they had any... integrity, they would hire you, Aaron, who right now, I'm talking to you, you're in Syria, right?
Yeah.
So instead of calling Aaron and saying, hey, could you come on our show and inform everybody about what's happening in Syria, since you got an award for Russiagate and we got it 1,000% wrong, since you got everything right about Syria, and could you please inform everybody about the OPCW whistleblower scandal that you've been testifying about in front of the U? Could you? No, in fact, they do the opposite, and he knows that you're right. I just showed you that. He knows that you're right by those tweets. And he tweeted out a link to a story saying that the gas attack in Syria was an Israeli false flag. That was Cenk Uygur saying that. I don't even want to. That's all. I can show you. I'll play the Roger Waters thing after you off. I just. Well,
let me just say, look,
you're on the ground in Syria, getting it right. They're in a studio cursing about you through a webcam. I think you could all decide who the real reporter is.
Yeah, look, and let me say, Jimmy, I've been here for 5 or 6 days, and I'm pretty well read on the Syria dirty war, but I actually wasn't prepared fully just for how sadistic and evil it was. And I've seen some crazy things. This country has been left in ruins because of a dirty war that it didn't start. The U.S. and its allies, some of the most powerful governments in the world, the UK, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Qatar, Israel, spent billions and billions of dollars on weapons that they gave to jihadi militias. Turkey let tens of thousands of people, of jihadis from all over the world, cross its borders. People from Uzbekistan, Pakistan, Afghanistan, the Uyghur region in China, all came to Syria to wage jihad. If they had been successful, if the U.S. and its allies had been successful, this society, for all of its problems, would have been ruled by sectarian warlords who, kill people for being gay or even for committing adultery, as is actually currently still happening in the province of Idlib, which is controlled by Al-Qaeda. And there was a massive propaganda operation launched at the Western public to drum up support for it, to make it think as if we were on the side of freedom fighters, moderate rebels. This is all going to be great. And so many people in our media system, like no other story I've ever seen before, fell for it. I mean, I have to admit, I was actually duped by some of the propaganda at first too, until I did some reading on my own and I realized just what a crime this was. And there's this entire propaganda structure built up around, especially on the Syria issue, where any dissent from the narrative gets just so much derision and hate. But you know this, like the Young Turks, that can't challenge any fact. So in the case of the OPCW story, this it's just one story in the Syria dirty war. And on this trip here, I've heard so many stories from Syrians who suffered losses of their families, people who were kidnapped by U.S.-backed rebels. I've seen, I went to someone's house who had a bunker because she lives in Damascus's old city, one of the most, precious places in the world, going back like to the first century. And she had a bunker underneath her house, and she had to live there for months because the rebels who we were arming were lobbing mortars, dozens of them a day. And so nobody was safe. And then in response to that, Syria, Russia, and Iran, but Syria and Russia especially, launched a very brutal bombing campaign. And I saw the impact of it, just like miles and miles of devastation, destroyed homes. And it's horrible to see. But ultimately, the fault for this whole thing are the people who gave billions of dollars to foreign fighters and some local Syrians to wage a war. What right do we have to do that? And it led to destroying what was a stable country, which before the war actually had one of the best healthcare systems in the entire Middle East. Healthcare for everybody. Now leaving it in ruins. You have the U.S. occupying still a third of Syria, preventing it from accessing its own oil and its own wheat, so keeping it impoverished and cut off from its own resources. Then you have this Al-Qaeda safe haven in the province of Idlib, which is protected by Turkey. And you have these murderous sanctions imposed by the U.S. under the Caesar Act, totally bipartisan. The toughest sanctions program, I think, in U.S. history, or one of the toughest, that explicitly target Syria's reconstruction. So you have all this rubble here, all these homes that have been destroyed, factories, everything. And Syria cannot rebuild because the U.S. will sanction you if you're a country that tries to fund reconstruction, or if you're a company that engages in a contract to help Syria's reconstruction. The U.S. will sanction you. So basically, nobody is really in here right now helping Syria rebuild because of these U.S. sanctions. And imagine making a country just in ruins through a dirty war, which there's so much evidence for now. Even Joe Biden admitted to it in a speech he gave that he had to apologize for when he was vice president because he said too much. But imagine destroying a country, flooding it with foreign fighters and weapons, and then preventing it from rebuilding, which of course only hurts the Syrian civilians. Like there's no government leaders who are in pain right now. They're doing fine. But I just wish all these people who call themselves journalists, who promoted this thing, who whitewashed it, who still are duped by the propaganda, like we saw with the Young Turks, I wish they can come here and see for themselves what they've been cheering on. And if they did, they would feel like this, like an endless amount of shame, because it's so disgusting what was done to this country. And it's so sad that our media system is so pathetic that people feel the need to advance and would rather put forward career advancement and being accepted by the establishment than reporting the facts about all the suffering we've wreaked on countries like Syria. It's just it's unbelievable.
Well, the idea that they won't let Syria rebuild after the war's over. So the war is supposed to be over, and they won't we let Nazi Germany rebuild after.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
You don't not let a country rebuild. That you know what that makes? That makes for another war. But that's exactly what they want, and that's why they. So they wanted regime change in Syria. Well, I've got video proof of it as far back as 2006, and I'm sure it goes back farther than that. I have CNN host asking Bashar al-Assad, saying, hey, they're talking about regime change. That's in 2006. So this idea that this was Arab Spring uprising that caused this was all instigated by the CIA and the countries that want to get Bashar al-Assad out of there. And there's many reasons, and there's competing reasons of why they want that done. Some people say there's a pipeline. Some people say it's at the behest of Israel. Some people say because of Qatar. But the point is, it's a nefarious reason why they want to overthrow the duly elected president of another country. Again, we did it. We did it in Iraq. We did it in Libya. Now we want to do it in Syria. Okay, so that it's the same story. And they're not stopping. Yeah. And Syria was one of the countries that Wes Clark Sr. Said they were out to bomb after 9/11. Go ahead, Aaron.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, it would be kind of like, let's say if you had Occupy Wall Street, right? And then taking Occupy Wall Street, which was a democratic protest calling for some reforms, and then hijacking that into an armed insurgency, arming the most fanatic people all over the world, bringing in Uzbekis and Afghanis and Pakistanis to wage jihad. That's what it would be like. Because there were protests in 2011 in Syria calling for democratic reforms. It is a police state. There were real protests. But at the same time, there was also a concerted effort by these countries you're talking about, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, the U.S., to support militants who were also attacking police forces. And the Syrian government responded very harshly. There was a crackdown. But look, no matter how they responded, I don't think they could have avoided this turning into a war. You don't wage a war on civilian protesters. If you're going to defeat a civilian uprising, you can do it pretty quickly. It happened. It happened all over the Arab Spring. Okay, this was a war where Syria was flooded with sophisticated weapons. The reason Russia came in on Syria's side was only after the U.S. gave anti-tank missiles, which were just wiping out Syrian soldiers. And they were winding up in the hands of al-Qaeda. Most of the anti-tank missiles that the U.S. put into Syria ended up in the hands of al-Qaeda. And that is why we now have the province of Idlib controlled by al-Qaeda, the largest al-Qaeda safe haven since 9/11. That's thanks to the U.S. And that is what Syria was fighting back against. Whatever you think about the Syrian government, they have plenty of problems. There's an entrenched, Ba'ath party that goes back decades. That there's all kinds of critiques of them that are legit. But nothing gives us the right to flood this country with weapons to destroy it and leave it in ruins. And it's like it's incredible what saying that opinion in U.S. media culture, whether it's progressive or mainstream, is considered somehow supporting a dictator. What it is, it's opposing a dirty war, and it's actually opposing the dictatorship of the U.S., which says that we have the right to destroy your country with our weapons, and when we lose, we're going to make you suffer with our sanctions. That's actually our dictatorship that we're imposing on Syria, and all these dupes who call themselves journalists are the ones marching in lockstep with it.
It's the equivalent of, in the run-up to the Iraq War, if you debunk the weapons of mass destruction lie, they would say you're pro-Saddam Hussein. You're an apologist for Saddam Hussein. No, you're just doing journalism and you're debunking the war lies, the pro-war narrative. And that's what the Young Turks should be doing. Of course, they never do. They're always pro-war. They wanted Trump to bomb Syria more. They say even though Cenk Uygur was skeptical of what the hell was going on, he called the bombs that Trump did Nerf bombs and said he should have bombed him more. Bombed Syria more. That was Cenk said. You know that, right? He called it Nerf bombs. Yeah. I'm not making that up. It is unbelievably disconcerting to see something like just their flex is just, he's a Russian. He's a like, what is this, 1950? What is going on? It's just nuts. Beyond nuts. And I think Aaron, their donor base, they're feeling the heat. And I think that's why they're flailing now. They're attacking people like you. They're attacking people like Julian Assange. Of course, their fans saw through them on Forced to Vote, and I think they see through them on this too. I think your character is impeccable, and I think you've won the award for Russiagate, and everything you've done on the OPCW leak has also been, nobody could challenge it on the facts ever, and that's why they don't do it, challenge you on the facts, and that's why they tried to smear you from behind a paywall. Go ahead.
And they may be failing, but look, on the positive side, the genuine leftist media space is thriving, because people now can see through all this stuff. After 4 years of Russiagate, where people were constantly told, this is it, this is the big thing, and they saw all these purportedly progressive people go along with it, a lot of people have gotten fed up, and that's why they've turned to shows like yours, and that's why the Gray Zone has developed a huge audience recently, because we're providing something that nobody else is doing. And not only that, they're not only not doing like real adversarial journalism, they're going along with establishment propaganda. So I kind of wish it wasn't this way, because I like getting along with people, and I don't want to spend all this time making fun of people and responding to smears. But look, if that's just how it is, it's how it is. And it's one day history will be written about this time when it's just such a sad time for media, but also maybe a positive one too, because it really showed who is deeply committed to something, who's committed to doing their job, following the facts, and not trying to be accepted by some imagined establishment comfort zone. Like Cenk talked to, I didn't see that clip until you showed it, but that when Cenk was like, enjoy your Russian blanket or something like that, what Cenk is actually doing is projecting. He's trying to snuggle himself inside the establishment blanket.
That's exactly
thinking
right.
that will bring him some good things, but it doesn't. It's an empty chase, because it's all bullshit. It's phony. It's phony. And that's why these people are miserable. If you meet establishment hacks, they're all miserable people, because their entire existence is built on lying all the time.
Well, it's funny.
And that's a pretty sad existence.
I went to Cenk Uygur's Twitter feed to see and he's interviewing people like Randy Weingarten, the head of the teachers union, in a friendly way, instead of exposing her corruption and how she's actually against her own membership and all the bad moves she's made and the corruption she's been involved with by funding private schools with public money, stuff like that. They didn't do that. How he brought on the head of the Lincoln Project. They gave him a sweetheart interview. That's the kind. So he brought on Narratandon. Same thing. These are the same. So it's obvious they've made the shift along with the squad and AOC. They're really happy to suck up to neoliberals because they need the cash. And they'll smear you at the drop of a hat. Instead of hiring people, by the way, the Young Turks got $24 million from right-wingers and Clinton donors. Where's their reporter on the ground in Syria? Where's their D.C. fucking reporter? They have nothing. They fired all their reporters. They got $24 million. They raised another $2 million to hire reporters, and then they fired all their reporters. And instead of hiring you or hiring somebody to go to Syria to rebut your report.
Yeah, no, I don't want to work for them. Sorry.
No,
I'm good.
What I'm saying is, instead of hiring someone to go to Syria to rebut, if Aaron's so wrong and it's disgusting what he's doing, why don't you take some of that $26 million, Cenk, and hire a reporter and send him to Syria to see what's going? Why don't you ask Anna Kasparian to go to Syria and so she could follow Aaron around and point out what he's lying about? Because that'll never happen. She'll never report on anything, even the Dairy Queen by her house. She'll never go out of the studio to report on a fucking thing, and we all know that. So anyway, Aaron, thanks. You're doing great work. Everyone sees it now. And so just continued success to you at the Gray Zone and your show Pushback. And stay safe in Syria. Anything you want to say before we say goodbye?
Thanks for all the support. I'll be doing more on my trip to Syria soon. I have to mentally process everything I've seen. It's been really crazy. It's unbelievable here. And I hope everyone has a chance to come here one day, because it's a beautiful country. There's so much. Today I went to a village that is the last in the world that still speaks Aramaic, the language of Jesus. And that was a village that was where this historic church that was occupied by Jabhat al-Nusra, al-Qaeda, who stole some of the artifacts from that church and actually held some of the sisters there hostage. And again, these are the people who, if the Young Turks of the world and the New York Times and everyone, all these people posing as like tough guys who support the quote unquote Syrian revolution, if they had been successful, it would have been sectarian fanatics like this who would have won and taken over Syria. And it just speaks to the imperial arrogance that underlies our American culture. And it's a sickness that we got to get rid of, because it's leading to misery for people around the world. And I've seen some of it firsthand. And when I meet people, I'm sorry. It's unfathomable the suffering that we impose on the world. And so I'm going to keep documenting it. And I always appreciate you giving me the opportunity to do so on your show.
Okay, buddy. Aaron Mate, everybody check out his Substack. Everybody check out his work at the Gray Zone. Thanks, buddy. Stay safe.
Thanks, Jerry.
Hey, everybody, this is the part where I tell you where all our live shows are, but there aren't any. And then this is why I tell you to join our premium program and get extra content, but nobody's got a fucking job. So just enjoy the video.